At the naval base in Norfolk, Virginia, routine was the norm. Soldiers followed strict schedules and life rarely changed. But today was different as a rumor swept through the ranks. President Donald Trump was visiting the mess hall. Some sailors were thrilled, others skeptical, questioning his motives while kitchen staff rushed to prepare an exceptional meal. Among them, 24-year-old Navy engineer Cy Mercer remained unfazed, indifferent to politics, and focused solely on her work, brushing it off as just another day, unaware that this day would soon shift the course of everything. Inside the mess hall, sailors lined up for food, the air thick with nervous anticipation. The cooks rushed to get everything perfect, speculating whether President Trump would simply give a speech and leave or actually engage with the troops. Cy Mercer sat at her usual table across from Chief Petty Officer Hank Reynolds, a 60-year-old veteran unfazed by high-profile visits. "Presidents come and go," Hank said, sipping his coffee. "But we're the ones who keep the ship running." Cy nodded, her thoughts drifting to her father, a Navy veteran who had struggled post-retirement, questioning whether the country truly valued its soldiers after their service ended. Suddenly, the mess hall doors swung open, and all eyes turned as President Donald Trump entered with his Secret Service detail. But instead of heading to a podium or reserved seat, he did the unexpected. He grabbed a tray and got in the food line like everyone else. A stunned silence spread through the room as soldiers exchanged bewildered looks, unsure if they could believe what they were seeing. Trump nodded to the kitchen staff and picked up his meal without ceremony, greeting everyone with a casual, "Good evening, gentlemen and ladies," as if he were just another sailor grabbing dinner. Some smiled, others stayed guarded, and Cy merely observed. She'd seen politicians visit before, but none had acted like this. With tray in hand, Trump scanned the room for a seat, ignoring the security team's subtle direction toward a VIP table and instead heading straight for Key and Hank's spot. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, already setting his tray down. Hank chuckled. "It's your country, Mr. President," while C nodded politely, wondering why he chose their table. Curious glances and murmurs rippled through the room. Trump picked up his fork and asked, "So what's for dinner?" Hank grinned. "Same thing we always get." And Trump took a bite, nodding in approval. Not bad. His laid-back presence threw C off more than she expected. This wasn't what C expected. Between bites of mashed potatoes, Trump looked around and asked, "So tell me, what's the hardest part of serving?" Hank answered first, "Missing my family," and several sailors nodded, thinking of the birthdays and milestones lost to long deployments. Cy, however, offered a different truth. After a pause, she said, "The feeling that people forget us after we serve." A hush fell over the table, and Trump set down his fork, looking at her intently. "What do you mean?" he asked. C took a deep breath. "My dad served 22 years. When he retired, he couldn't find steady work. It felt like the world just moved on." Trump leaned back, visibly reflective. "That's not right," he said softly, and for the first time, Cy noticed something unexpected in his eyes. Genuine concern. She rarely shared her father's story, but James Mercer's quiet battle after 2 decades of service now felt seen. He found himself jobless and struggling to support his family. Cy continued, her voice steady. "He gave everything to this country, but once he was out, he felt abandoned." Hank nodded solemnly. "Happens to a lot of us, kid." Trump was quiet for a moment before asking, "What's your dad's name?" "James Mercer, sir," Cy replied. "And where is he now?" She hesitated. "Still looking for work." Trump tapped his fingers on the table, frustration flickering in his eyes. "That shouldn't be happening," he said firmly. Without another word, he leaned toward an aide and whispered something. The aide nodded and walked away, already dialing a number. Turning back to CI, Trump said, "Tell your dad to expect a call soon." "A call from who?" she asked, frowning. Trump only smiled. "Let's just say, from someone who can help." The sailors at the table exchanged confused looks, and Hank raised an eyebrow but stayed quiet. See, she didn't know what to believe. She'd heard promises like this before, all talk and no follow-through. But something in Trump's expression made her stop. He didn't seem like he was bluffing. It wasn't for show. He meant it. Cy had
no idea that a single dinner conversation would change her father's life forever.
Trump kept eating, but his mind seemed elsewhere as he occasionally glanced around the mess hall, quietly observing sailors of all ranks laughing, eating, and swapping stories. "This place reminds me of the construction sites I used to visit," he finally said. "Hardworking people doing the real work but rarely getting the credit." Cy didn't know how to respond. She wasn't used to politicians sounding that genuine. Trump wiped his mouth with a napkin. "No veteran should struggle after serving. It's unacceptable." Hank chuckled. "Been like that forever, sir." Trump's expression turned serious. "Maybe it's time to change that." His words hung in the air, making everyone at the table pause. He leaned toward another aide and spoke quietly. The aide quickly pulled out a phone and began taking notes. Trump wasn't just smiling for cameras. He was paying attention. Then he stood and faced the room, his voice steady. "You serve your country with honor, and I respect that. But it's not enough to just say thank you. You deserve action." Action. A murmur swept through the mess hall. No one had expected a speech, let alone one like this. "I promise you, changes are coming," Trump said. "You won't be forgotten." C wanted to believe him, but years of watching veterans struggle made her skeptical. Still, something in his voice made it hard to doubt. He sounded like he truly meant it. The next morning, her father, James Mercer, received a call from an unknown number. "Mr. Mercer?" a professional voice asked. "Yes, this is James," he replied cautiously. "I'm with a defense contracting company. We reviewed your service record and would like to offer you a position." James was stunned. How did you get my name?" he asked. "The president personally recommended you," the caller replied. James sat down, hands trembling. After months of silence, rejection, and discouragement, out of nowhere, everything had changed. He had a job offer. CIA rushed to call her father after hearing the news. "Dad, what happened?" she asked. His voice cracked. "I got a job, Kai. A real job." CIA held the phone tightly, barely able to believe it. Her father, a man who had served his country for 22 years, had finally been given the opportunity he deserved. "It's a government contractor," James explained. "They want me to oversee logistics for military bases." Tears welled in CIA's eyes. "Dad, this is huge." James chuckled softly. "I don't even know what to say. I never thought someone would actually help." C wiped her eyes, smiling. "I think I know who to thank." That night, as she lay in bed, she thought back to her dinner with Trump. He had made a promise, and he had kept it. And James Mercer wasn't the only one. Across the country, other retired Navy personnel were getting surprise phone calls from companies they'd applied to months ago. At the naval base, sailors began to notice a change. "Something's going on," Hank muttered. Too many people were getting unexpected calls. Cy nodded, already knowing the reason. It was Trump. Quietly, he had launched an initiative to connect veterans with employers, cutting through the red tape that had held them back for so long. "This is different," Hank admitted. Politicians often talked about helping, but this felt real. For the first time in a long while, C felt hope, not just for her father, but for every veteran who had been forgotten. A week later, CA received an unexpected invitation to a closed-door meeting at the base. To her surprise, Trump was there, along with military officials and defense contractors. He was serious, listening closely as officers discussed the challenges veterans faced. CIE stayed quiet at first, unsure why she had been invited. Then, to her shock, Trump looked directly at her and said, "CA, tell them what you told me." Swallowing hard, she spoke about the struggles veterans face. When they leave service, they shouldn't have to beg for jobs after sacrificing everything, CIE said. Trump nodded firmly. "Exactly. That's why we're fixing it." By the End of the meeting, it was clear this wasn't just talk. Real change was underway. Afterward, Trump pulled Saye aside. "You know, I wasn't always a politician," he said. "I've built businesses and made deals. But this," he gestured toward the sailors in the mess hall, "this is the most important deal I'll ever make." So he studied him, trying to understand. "Why do you care so much?" Trump's expression softened. "Because I've seen too many good men and women left behind. That's not how we should treat our heroes." She realized she had misjudged him. No matter her political views, she couldn't deny what she'd witnessed. "I hope you keep pushing," Trump added. "The country needs people like you." For the first time, C felt her voice truly mattered. In the weeks after Trump's visit, something changed. Every Friday during dinner at the naval base, they began sharing veterans' success stories. A soldier who started a business, a former Marine turned firefighter, and a Navy vet just like Sai's dad, who had finally found stability after years of struggle. Morale soared as sailors no longer feared life after service. They saw real examples of veterans thriving. "It all started with one dinner," Hank said one evening. C smiled and agreed. "Yeah, one dinner and a promise." Trump's visit had sparked something bigger than anyone expected. The message was clear. Service doesn't end when the uniform comes off, and now people were finally listening. A few weeks later, Saya received a formal letter from the White House. With trembling hands, she opened it to find a handwritten note from Trump himself. "Sai, your father's story opened my eyes. I promise to make a change, and I will keep serving with honor and keep my promise. Donald J. Trump." She stared at the words, a lump rising in her throat. It wasn't just a generic letter, it was personal. C framed the letter on her wall as a daily reminder that one conversation over dinner had sparked real change. It proved that change wasn't just possible, it was already happening. She had always believed service meant sacrifice, but now she understood it also meant a responsibility to support those who served before her. Inspired, she started a program on the base to help sailors prepare for civilian life, offering resume workshops, interview training, and connections to veteran-friendly employers, small steps that made a big difference. Hank watched proudly. "You're turning into a leader, Mercer." She smiled. "I learned from the best. Service isn't just about following orders. It's about making sure no soldier is left behind." Years later, long after Trump's visit, Sae stood before a new class of recruits telling them, "No matter who's in charge, remember this. Your service matters, and people will fight for you." She had become a powerful voice for veterans, making sure no one was forgotten, all thanks to a simple meal in a Navy mess hall.